Hi, my name is Melanie Dizon. I'm the Director of Education and Content at the Davis Phinney Foundation, and I am here today to talk about nutrition and Parkinson's with Jess Schroeder. How you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good to have you.
Thank you.
Jess is from Expedition Wellness, and she lives in Iowa.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear, Jess, how did you get into the nutrition space? And then in particular, how did you get working with people with Parkinson's?
Absolutely. So my story stems back to when I was younger and actually starts with sports nutrition of all things. I was in high school. I was a high school athlete, and in track in my senior year, I decided that I wanted to try my best to do my best running that season. And I wasn't really like that great of a runner at that time. And I just felt like there's got to be something missing. And I was training extra hard and nothing seemed to be like changing. And I started to become obsessed with nutrition. I'm like, how is this affecting me? And I changed everything about my life. I grew up eating lots of junk food, lots of Mountain Dew, lots of, all the things. And I had to change a lot. And I think I shocked my parents because I started making dinner. All of a sudden I'm making salmon and wild rice and like all these fun things. And they're like, what is this? Growing up on a farm in Iowa, like that's not a common food you would see. And it changed my life. And I had the best track season. And I was like, wow, this is what nutrition can do. And I felt amazing. And so that's what really spurred me into nutrition and my passion. And I've never, steered away from that path, which is pretty incredible because most people change their path a couple of times. But I just knew from that moment, like, this is what I'm going to do. I want to help other people, realize how nutrition can help them as well. So that's where I started. Where I'm at currently in my present time, I am owner of Expedition Wellness, as you'd mentioned, and we are a nutrition consulting business. We work with all types of people. Our primary focus is weight loss, but weight loss really encompasses so many different things, right? We talk about intuitive eating. We talk about, diabetes care. We talk about Parkinson's. We talk about the whole realm of health and wellness, really. We talk about how to be active, how to make habit changes. I mean, you name it. We do a lot of stuff. We're actually going into corporate wellness. We want to work with teams, and we want to do more in the Parkinson's community as well, because there are so many opportunities out there to help many of these people. So we're looking forward to that, and the future is bright. So yeah, that's where we're at.
So how did you get your first person with Parkinson's?
Well, so I spoke at the APDA conference that was the Iowa chapter here in June. So I'm still kind of newish to the whole Parkinson's community. And I just had such a great experience, and I got to connect with so many different people there. I actually realized I know many people with Parkinson's as well. There were many people there that I knew, and it was very touching to talk with so many of them and have them come up to me after my talk and say, like, we need this. This is so important. And just like realizing how much of a gap in care there is when it comes to nutrition. And so it kind of pushed me to be like, okay, what can we do for this community? And that has just kind of spurred into all different kinds of things and working with the Davis Phinney Foundation on some different projects. And from there, we did get some clients and patients, from that Parkinson's presentation. And yeah, we're just looking forward to helping more people.
Great. So we'll go really broad, and then we're going to dive into a whole bunch of questions that I've gotten over the years about nutrition and Parkinson's. But what would you say, like, maybe we can even go back to that talk. What are the most, like, sort of the three most important things that people with Parkinson's should take into consideration with their nutritional plan?
I know this is going to sound really like extra broad and extra silly, but one of the biggest things that comes to my mind is water. Water is essential to our bodies, but it's so important when you are taking medications. When your bowel movements are slowing down, you need that water to help keep things going. You need water to help you chew and swallow. You need water to hydrate you and keep you from getting dizzy or nauseous. And, for that orthostatic hypotension, it's like, that's going to help that as well. It's like, water is so important. I can't stress it enough. And I heard a stat the other day, I can't remember it precisely, but it was very, very high. And it was disturbing of how many people are walking around dehydrated and what that causes. And it was very disturbing. And I can tell you, all of my patients, I'm talking about drinking water and helping them develop a plan for how to get to that goal to make sure that they're getting their water in for the day. So that's a really, really big one. Number two, I would say fruits and vegetables. You know, fruits and vegetables are my passion. Of course, being a dietitian, I think that's kind of cliche, but it's true. I'm really passionate about helping people understand that vegetables don't have to be just like sitting and eating a bunch of broccoli. It doesn't have to be sitting and eating a big salad. I can tell you I hardly eat either of those. You know, I love to have fun with spaghetti squash, or this weekend I had a retreat with my team and we did some kohlrabi cooked into a chorizo hash for breakfast. It was delicious. We do zoodles, you know, with meatballs and marinara. So many fun things you can do. And so really teaching people how to incorporate those vegetables in a fun way so that they'll want to eat them. And vegetables and fruits are filled with antioxidants, which have been shown to have neuroprotective, what's the word I'm looking for?
Qualities.
Thank you. And they can really help bring down the inflammation, which is such a high issue for people with Parkinson's. So fruits and vegetables. And number three, this is probably a less popular opinion option, but for me, it's something I'm really passionate about. And I feel like there's a huge gap in this. And what's being talked about is protein. And, you know, protein is essential. Like we have to consume protein in order to keep our muscles and joints and everything going. Every single cell in our body is made up of protein, and our body can only make a certain portion of that. And so we have to consume it. And so when you have people with Parkinson's being told not to eat protein at all, and that's not what they hear. That's what they hear. They hear the doctor say, you can't eat, you know,
Right.
protein with this medication, or when you're taking this medication, they hear that as like, I can't eat protein, when that's not necessarily the facts. Like we need to look at making a schedule so that we can fit that protein into the day. And so that's really where become a passion of mine, is helping people with Parkinson's understand that they need protein, but it just takes a little extra planning and how to get that into your day and work around your meds.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's, you know, it's reasonable that a lot of times they're like, well, that just means none, because the amount of planning I have to do in my day anyway, like I'm planning when I can exercise, when I feel good, when I can work, when I'm going to take my meds, when I'm going to do all of these things. And then you say like, well, if you're going to have protein, you better make it, you know, it's got to be this time and this time. And then they're just like, you know what, forget it. I'm not even going to eat it. And this will help me. And so today I hope we can come up with some really great strategies for them to get it and to, you know, get all the building blocks that they need to work well with Parkinson's.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm a huge fan of the water every day. Take a full glass with every time you take a medication. It's going to actually make your medicine work, aside from all the other downstream impacts that you just talked about, for sure. Great. So we're going to talk about, now we're going to go sort of deep into the questions that people have asked us.
Yeah.
And they're specific, but I think that's great. People have specific questions, and I've culled through hundreds of questions and came up with the ones that sort of show up the most. Yeah. And we'll just kind of run through those.
Sounds good.
So the initial two are, you know, I might get one side or the other. Someone's either saying, I keep losing weight, I don't want to lose the weight. What's happening? What can I do about it? And then the other, on the flip side of that, is like, no matter what I do, I keep gaining weight. What can I do about that? So let's start first with losing weight. Let's talk about all the different reasons why somebody with Parkinson's might be losing weight, and then what they can do.
Yeah. You know, when somebody is losing weight rapidly and, you know, not understanding why that's happening, you know, I really think it's important that we take a step back and we look at, okay, what has changed, or what is happening, you know, in my day, what's happening to my body that could be potentially relating to this. And especially with Parkinson's, you know, there's a lot of different symptoms from the medications and from the disease that can cause you to lose weight, which is number one, just loss of appetite, not really wanting to eating, which can also come from, you know, the mental and emotional side of the disease, which can come from depression. That's so common for people to not want to eat because of depression. Constipation. If you're not going to the bathroom regularly, I tell this to my clients all the time, you know, they might not lose weight because they're constipated, but also you might lose weight because you're not eating enough because you're constipated. So it can kind of go both ways with that. Trouble chewing and swallowing. So if you're having these issues, it's really important to recognize and say, okay, you know what, like I'm having some issues. Maybe I should seek out some help because that's preventing me from eating a lot of the foods I'm used to eating. And that could be a big reason why they're losing weight. Nausea, you know, whether it's from the medications, you know, or just not eating regularly, could be a combination of both. I think it's important to sit down and look at that. Like what am I doing throughout the day? I know a lot of my clients maybe skip meals or don't eat until later in the day. And I'm like, well, obviously you're not going to feel great if you're not fueling your body earlier in the day. But on top of that, especially with medication, it's so important to make sure that you're eating a little something with that. We'll talk about that later as to what that might look like. But access to food is also really important, you know, especially when we're talking about Parkinson's and what, you know, they're able to do on their own. And maybe they need a caregiver to help, or maybe they can't get to the grocery store on their own, or they're scared to go to the grocery store. There's so many things that, you know, elements that go with that. But that could be a big part of it too, is just not having access to food. So then they're not eating because they don't have the food available.
Right. So a couple of things that you touched on. So the water, in terms of, if you don't take water with your meds, some people get nauseous, right?
Yep.
And so that's the other reason to say, there's a million reasons why to drink water. So definitely do that. The other thing is, some people that have dyskinesia, are like, wow, nothing's changed. But the reality is, if your body is moving 24/7 in that way, you're burning calories. Like your body is
absolutely
moving. And so if that is something that you experience, that's definitely something to look at. And we'll talk about this with the other one, but I think it's important to say, like, let's say you've taken all of these things into account. And you're like, yeah, no, still, I feel like I'm doing the thing, I'm still doing it. Go see your doctor. Like, this could be, it could be unrelated to Parkinson's, right? You could be losing weight for another reason. And it's important to go get checked out. So definitely kind of do a checklist, see what you're doing. If nothing else has changed, make an appointment and see if there's
absolutely. I completely agree with that. And alongside of that, once you've talked with your doctor and your doctor confirms that like there isn't necessarily another underlying issue, I would go see a dietitian, you know, because one of the things that we do is, you know, here in our own office, we have a body composition analysis scale that actually tells us each person's basal metabolic rate. And so we're able to calculate very efficiently, very effectively, someone's exact amount of calories that they're burning. And so then we can help them track those calories and help them figure out, like, okay, this is where you're not getting enough food at all. You know, like you definitely need this many calories and you're eating this many. That's why you're losing weight, you know? And so it really gets right to it, you know? And so a lot of people just don't know that that's available or that they can do that. And so I do recommend, you know, seeking out a dietitian's help as well, once you've confirmed with the doctor that that's not
right. And just the keeping a food journal, you know, it's kind of a pain for some people, but if you just start taking it, you're like, oh, because you can like get constipated or feel nauseous and you feel full. So you feel like you've eaten maybe, but you actually didn't. And so writing every single thing down and then taking it to that dietitian, you can be like, oh, here's what I'm actually doing. And you can fill in that gap. What about people that are gaining weight?
People that are gaining weight, it actually has a lot of the same similarities to, believe it or not, but just slightly different. You know, one thing to think about with weight gain is think about, again, what in my schedule has changed maybe since I've been diagnosed. You know, am I eating less in the morning because that's when I take my meds, then I'm maybe binging in the afternoon? Or, what does my food routine look like? I see that with so many clients where they don't even realize that they're just going way too long in between eating. And especially with Parkinson's and the medication routine, like that could be throwing off the food routine. And when you go too long without eating, then your blood sugars get too low and then you're just starving. And especially when you have a higher need for calories and then you just kind of overdo it, that's a very common issue for everybody, but especially then with Parkinson's. The medication can also just cause the binge eating and just eating behavior changes. So I think it's really important to take a good hard look at yourself. I know that's hard, but maybe even have a caregiver, who's around you a lot say, yeah, you've kind of been doing this differently, or you've been eating more, at your meals, or, snacking more. You haven't been as active, so you're not burning as many calories. So there are lots of little elements to it that I think just by doing some simple observations can really help you come to some conclusions as to what might be going on. But again, just like with weight loss, I think it's really important to make sure you are keeping your doctor in the loop about this and see what they say. And then if they recommend that you go see a dietitian, I would recommend that. And again, sometimes it's just about creating a new schedule for you, with your new medication routine.
Right. Okay, let's talk about constipation. Huge problem for people with Parkinson's.
Yeah.
What do you recommend? I mean, some of this, is like, I know that, when I'm talking to just somebody without Parkinson's, we're talking about constipation. It's like, here, try this. And it's like, oh, those are all things that will work. But constipation with people with Parkinson's is like relentless and it's a tough nut to crack. So what are some things that you've told your clients that's working?
So I would say like natural sources, like natural ways, without like turning to supplements or medication. I would say always start with water. Water, again, I mean, we're just going to keep repeating water throughout this entire webinar because it's just so important. But that's going to help with moving things through the gut and help you go. Dehydration obviously slows all of that down. And so it's really important to make sure you do that. The other thing that is kind of forgotten are electrolytes. So electrolytes are really important. And I talk about this with dehydration, and I talk about it in one of the other questions. But electrolytes are like the electricity for all of our cells. And if we are low in electrolytes, it can cause dizziness, it can cause nausea, but also it can slow down the gut because, we have these little sphincters in our gut that are little muscles. And think about when muscles are contracting, all of our muscles are contracting, but if they're not contracting, then what's happening? Well, it's stuck there and it's not moving. So electrolytes can be really, really important to help you with that. And magnesium in particular is really, really important for that. And you can take, natural sources of magnesium. They also have, very specific types of magnesium that are specific to, constipation or muscle contraction or restless legs and different things like that. So make sure that you're, getting the right type. That's a really important one. The other thing I would say is, again, back to fruits and vegetables, getting that fiber, but you can also get fiber through whole grains. You can get fiber through, cereals. You can get them through even yogurt, like some of the Greek yogurts that I recommend have added fiber, which is great. But you want to make sure you're getting a mixture of soluble and insoluble fiber. And that's a fact that a lot of people kind of forget. They're like, oh, it has fiber. Well, like an apple has a lot of fiber, but half of it is soluble and half of it's insoluble. And if you're not eating the skin, then you're not getting the insoluble. And so it's important to understand what does what. So soluble is going to bind you up and insoluble is going to help move things through the gut. And so you want to make sure you're getting a mixture of that. Some labels, like for different foods that have fiber added to them, they will actually list it out and tell you which is which. So for example, oats, if you buy just old-fashioned oats, Quaker oats or whatever brand you buy, it'll say insoluble fiber on there. And so it's important to have a mixture of both versus like insoluble might cause the opposite issue. It might cause more loose stools if you have too much of that. And soluble will help bind you up more and can cause more issues. So
that's good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about a sweet tooth. So somebody had written and said, my sweet tooth has really kicked in since I was diagnosed with Parkinson's 4 years ago. I have constant sugar cravings, gaining weight appropriately to that. What can I do to reduce or eliminate my sugar cravings?
Yeah, I actually just really love this question because I think it goes well with a lot of things that I try to stress with a lot of my clients. So I'll start with going again back to water. So we've talked about how water helps rehydrate you and it helps with a lot of things. But I think that one of the other things we forgot to talk about is that water helps you feel full. And when you are dehydrated and you're walking around dehydrated, you're constantly feeling like you're hungry and you're constantly feeling like I need carbs. And so you're constantly seeking out those carbs when all you need is really water. And so one of the first things you can do is just take a look at how much water am I actually getting. I actually have a water tracking app that I recommend to my clients if you're a techie person, and it is awesome. And my clients love it. They've been having a lot of fun with it. And it also tracks their other liquids, but it also reminds them to drink water, which they really appreciate because, again, we're all busy. So it helps create a schedule and a routine for that water. But that is really, really important for helping nix those carbs or carb cravings. The other thing I would say, again, is back to protein. So when you are somebody who has been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and again, back to the whole, like you've been told, not to eat protein around your medications, and then you're like, you know what, I'm not going to worry about the protein. I'm just not going to have protein. Then what are you consuming? Right? So if you think about it, the other two major macronutrients are carbohydrates and fat. So if you're not eating protein, then you're consuming a lot of fat and carbs, and excess carbs turns to fat, which then leads to, weight gain. But then also because you don't have the protein to help stabilize your blood sugars throughout the day, then you end up craving more carbs. And when you do eat those carbs, you have blood sugar spikes and drops all throughout the day. And it creates this really vicious cycle of like, I'm full for like 15 minutes. And then I'm hungry again. Ooh, where's the next carb? Ooh, I'm full. Oh, more carbs. And so it's just like this vicious cycle. So that's why I'm so passionate about helping people with Parkinson's work protein into their day in the right way and in the way that works around their medication schedule, because I want them to understand how truly important it is for stabilizing their blood sugars.
Yeah. I mean, so it's interesting because it's not like these 3 macronutrients like just started. Well, it's not like it was like, oh, in the last 20 years, we've decided, I mean, we've gotten crazy about macros and this portion, that portion, crazy diet world and that kind of thing. But I mean, these are 3 macronutrients found in food since the beginning of food.
Science.
And we need them. Like we need them all, right? And so it's like there is a feeling of satiety that happens when you actually eat them in the right amounts, right? Not too much of any one thing.
Absolutely.
And when you're sated, it's very rare that you have these cravings for sugar. Like it just doesn't happen. And actually, when you start taking out all the sugar of your diet, food actually tastes different. It just totally tastes different. You don't eat any sugar at all. Like get rid of just added sugar in all of your diet, and then you start eating the foods. It's a totally different feeling. So
it's so true.
Totally different taste, different level of like satiation and pleasure and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I think it's important. One of the things I really wanted to stress with this is, you don't necessarily have to focus on taking things away, because I think then that comes with a sense of deprivation. So instead of focusing on taking away the sweets, focus on what am I missing that I can add back in. And so that's why I wanted to bring up the water and the protein, because those are most likely the top 2 things that you're not including. And then once you include those, then it brings those macronutrients back into better balance. And then you don't have those strong urges and strong cravings. And then you can start focusing on, okay, my taste buds are changing. Now I can start, incorporating more vegetables and more proteins. And it's a ripple effect.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, we should have talked about this around constipation, but one of the questions we get a lot about is gastric emptying. And with people with Parkinson's, can you talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, so this is a subject that I would say is, not as well talked about, at least in my realm. But what I do know is, again, kind of back to those things that we talked about with water. Water is also important for gastric emptying. And I mentioned magnesium, and I'll repeat it again because I hope that everybody caught it earlier, but if you didn't, it's equally important for gastric emptying and helping move the bile through the ducts and out the other end. And it's very important to have those electrolytes. Magnesium is in leafy green vegetables, legumes, whole grains, yogurt. So if you're not really consuming a lot of those foods, you're probably not getting much magnesium in your diet. And I know, again, I'm not great with stats, but I know that there's a stat out there that says that 60% plus of the population is deficient in magnesium. And this can significantly slow down gastric emptying and then cause other issues from there. And so it's really important to make sure that you are staying up with those electrolytes. And if you need a supplement, then I think that's the way to go. Same thing with fiber. You just want to be careful with fiber. Again, like I mentioned earlier, with the soluble versus insoluble, in order to kind of get the emptying through, for lack of better terms, you need to sometimes lay off of the fiber for a little bit in order to get it to move through. I know that sounds kind of backwards, but eating like white rice and some of those, simple grains can really help with that. And then once you've emptied, then it's time to move back to the higher fiber foods. Carbonated beverages, alcohol, and smoking can also cause some issues with this. So make sure you're laying off, like if you are somebody who consumes alcohol or carbonated beverages, making sure to lay off of those for some time. Focus on foods that are easier to digest, think of like soups, having like liquids more so, that can just help move things through as well and be gentler on the gut. And I think that's really important during those times. Also making sure to chew your foods thoroughly, cut them into smaller pieces. You might want to avoid, which I would avoid, raw vegetables during this time. Again, think of it as like almost like a flare, again, to put it into different words. And you want to just take care of the gut the best you can during that time. So you just want to eat very gentle foods to help move it through.
Okay. Great. Let's talk a little bit about certain diets, because a lot of people will come and say, hey, I heard I should be a vegan if I have Parkinson's, or I'm going to do the opposite. I should be carnivore or keto or something like that. What do you talk to your clients about regarding different diets?
I just have to chuckle a little bit because as a dietitian, this is one of the most popular questions I get asked when I'm out on the street. And I try to not even mention sometimes that I'm a dietitian, because then it's like, this is the question I get. What diet should I be following? Honestly, you should just be following a well-balanced diet. And I know that sounds super general and generic, but that's really what the truth. You should be eating a mixture of whole grains, fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, work in some good oils, like avocado oils or olive oils, and then leave some room for some fun, right? Have some of those fun foods that you want to have, but anything that you have in excess. So even people who drink, 5 cups of coffee a day, they need to maybe work on their caffeine consumption. But by having 1 cup of coffee a day, that's totally acceptable. And that's in moderation, right? And so it's kind of the same thing, when we're talking about food and what would be acceptable or recommended to somebody with Parkinson's is, finding that balance is really, really important. So, finding a new balance and a new routine with medications and whatnot as well is really important. But following a specific diet can be really actually more frustrating, because then you're trying to adhere to that diet standards, which is not necessary whatsoever, because there are no specific recommendations for people with Parkinson's. And so I think it's important to just focus on the basics, again, water, protein, vegetables, movement, focus on those basics. And if you're doing those things, then you're doing great, because I can tell you 99% of people are not.
Right.
So,
I mean, I always think, talking about nutrition and food is like, it seems straightforward. It's 100% not. And it's also super psychological. It's an emotional thing for a lot of people. I was a therapist for a long time, and I worked with tons of people with eating disorders. And sometimes people want a diet. They want a certain type of diet because this is like, I can go into this little spot and I feel safe here. And I feel like I have rules, and these rules are going to just get me through the day. And that feels better for me. And so if you're one of those people where it's like, oh, if I don't have this like rule where I'm a vegan or I'm keto or I'm this or that, then it's hard for you. One thing to consider is be like, oh, well, I'm creating the Melanie diet. Okay. This is the Judy diet. Like, this is the diet. And
I love that.
You figure it out yourself. And if it helps you to have rules where you're like, I'm going to eat at this time and that time and whatever, and I don't eat these foods, but I eat these foods, like whatever you need to do, if that helps you feel like a little bit more control, do that. You can have maybe 4 breakfasts that you recycle and you just use them over and over. Same thing with dinner, whatever it is. Because the last thing we want is for you to be thinking about food all the time.
Absolutely.
We just want it to be the thing that is like driving you and feeding you and helping you live better. So whatever that means, try and fit your nutritional plan with your personality, your tendency, your needs. But you get to make it up. You don't have to listen to someone else's diet out there. You get to listen to what the food's doing to you, because that's the most important thing.
And that's honestly exactly, I love how you put that. You put that perfectly, way better than I would have. But that's something that we do here at Expedition Wellness. So we have like a general guideline, like how much protein, what's a goal for good, amount of protein at each meal? What's a good amount of carbs to have at each meal? So we have like a general guideline for all those rule followers out there that really just need like a plan. But then what we do at their initial consultation is we sit down with them and we completely take those guidelines and steer it completely towards that person and what their life is like, because not one person is the same. I have somebody I just saw a little bit ago who works at Target, and she was working an overnight shift because of the holidays. And she was asking me, like, how do I eat? Like, what does that look like? And so we were gearing her eating schedule towards when she was going to be working, when she would have a break, how could she work that in? And that's really important, because otherwise what was happening is she was going home and then binging because she wasn't eating at the normal times that she was supposed to, or because she was working weird hours, she would go and eat a lot of random things because she didn't have like a meal time. I'm like, just eat your breakfast at 11 p.m. and pretend it's 6 a.m. It's okay. It's fine.
Right.
But I think it's really important to make sure that you're not trying to live by somebody else's guidelines for you, because that's not your life. And that's where so many people go wrong, or they struggle to make, healthy eating a lifestyle, is that they're trying to adhere to somebody else's standards versus their own life. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. And I think at the beginning, there's probably, you spend a little bit more time than you're thrilled about spending on figuring things out, because you want to know how your body's reacting and how your symptoms are based on certain foods and how your medication's working and all that. But then pretty soon, you can get dialed in, and then just, it's kind of like set it and forget it. And the other great thing about working with a dietitian, if you want to, is they can help you just like meal plan for the week and like your grocery list and all of those things that kind of take the guesswork out of it, right?
It does. One of the things we really try to do is make all this whole process so much easier for people. Really, I want dietitians to become a part of the me team for everybody. Everybody has a therapist, everybody has, a lawyer, everyone has like all these different people in their lives, but they don't have a dietitian. And dietitians can really help, break everything down into simple goals and help them, not be so overwhelmed by the grocery store, or be so overwhelmed by all the products that are out there, or I should have this, or I can't have that, or, all these different things. We help narrow that down and really help them understand what would be best for them. because they might not even know that. And
Right.
so we really try to help make this whole healthy eating thing much more effective and efficient than if you were to do it on your own. And it does take time. I want to remind everybody that like, you can't just expect yourself to go into, you go to the grocery store, you buy all these groceries. Like, let's say you work with a dietitian and he or she says, go get these groceries. This is what I'd recommend. And you go and you're like, okay, what do I do with these things now? And then on top of that, you think like, well, you're like, I don't like this food that they're having me eat, or, it's too hard, or whatever the case might be, or it's too expensive. I think it's important to remember that change takes time, and that you can't expect your habits and your way of thinking around food to change overnight, because it's not. I work with my clients for a year plus and then some, because it takes a long time.
Yeah, it does. Shoot.
I know, right? It doesn't happen in 24 hours.
Right. We talked real briefly, but I'd love to just kind of put a pin in this piece where trouble with chewing and swallowing. For some people, it makes it really difficult to eat. What are three or four things that people can do to make chewing and swallowing a little bit easier?
A couple of things that come to mind with chewing and swallowing, and just kind of making it easier. Like I mentioned, again, drinking water, because that's going to help to lubricate the food as it goes down and works its way down. Again, then it's going to help lubricate it in the gut. So all kinds of good things happen in there. Because think about it, like if you try to eat something with a dry mouth, what happens? Like it kind of gets stuck. I'll never forget this one time. I thought it would be nice to try this different bar while I was on a run. And I realized like, okay, well, my mouth is really dry. I can't exactly swallow a bar that's really chewy. So I nixed that idea. But that's just a perfect example of like, my mouth was really, really dry. So trying to chew and then swallow that bar was not going to happen. And so I think it's really important to make sure you're lubricating in that way. Another tip would be to eat more like ground meats, especially if you're going to try and work on getting that protein. And then with vegetables, making sure to cut them into smaller pieces, or, you can buy, steam in the bag vegetables that are already pre-cut. And then even like rice, which is a great texture to just add to different foods. And then you could add regular rice to it as well to get your grain. But that's a great way to get vegetables if you're struggling with chewing and swallowing, because then they're broken down nice, but they're not like mushy, which I think is also really important when we're talking about texture issues and people, enjoying their food. We also want to make sure that it's not just a big pile of mush.
Right.
So that's a really easy tip to incorporate. Another one would be adding sauces, oils, different ways of also lubricating your food. This also can help you not only with swallowing, but if you are one of those type of people that is struggling with weight loss, adding oils and different sauces to your foods can actually help increase the calories, and then therefore help you to stop that weight loss from happening. And with that, I say have some fun with some soups. There are so many great soups out there. I think Mel, you tried chicken salsa verde.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that, I love that recipe for a lot of different reasons as far as meal prepping, but it's very liquidy. And so it keeps chicken from like drying out. I don't know about any of you out there, but even for me, I struggle to sometimes swallow chicken or turkey. Thanksgiving turkey can be a struggle sometimes if it doesn't have enough gravy on it, and if it was overcooked. So again, use that as an example of like, okay, how can I lubricate this a little bit more? And soups are a great way to do that, or different recipes that have a lot of, broth or different moisture things added to them.
Right. Great. I will add that recipe to this for sure.
Okay, good.
What about sort of timing types of food for before and after exercise? What do you suggest for people?
Yeah. So this is kind of a tricky one because it also depends on medication timing as well, right? I will say that most importantly, carbohydrates are what you want to have before you work out, most definitely. That also correlates with what I would recommend if you are on a regimen that you're taking your medication at like 7 a.m., then I would recommend, getting up, drinking that water, having some kind of a carbohydrate. It could just be as simple as some toast with some jam on it. It could be some oatmeal, made with water, and then add a little cinnamon to it, or a little, honey or something like that to get your carbs. And then electrolytes. So I mentioned those earlier, but electrolytes are also important for helping you, with your workout. Make sure that you don't, have any kind of dizziness, or if you are dehydrated, it's going to help rehydrate you. So electrolytes can really help you, especially if you're working out in the morning. I know a lot of my clients do tend to work out in the morning, and they try to go in and do it fasted, which I don't recommend, because that's like driving your car on empty. It's like you gotta fuel up before you go, and especially if you're taking medications in the morning, this is a bad idea. So make sure to get your electrolytes and have some of those carbohydrates pre-workout. I have all kinds of like other, bars and things like that that you can buy. And I'm happy to share some ideas on that if you'd like, just to give people some purchase ideas if they don't have time to like make something in the morning.
Right.
And as far as post-workout protein, and again, this kind of goes into working around your med schedule. So if you're taking your meds at 7 a.m. and you're at the gym by 7:30, then, and let's say you're, exercising for an hour, you need to make sure that you're within an hour and a half or so of when you're going to be taking your next dosage. So you may have to end up waiting to have your protein, which isn't ideal, because we really need to like take advantage of that opportunity. I call it the window of opportunity after a workout, which is about 30 to 45 minutes post-workout, where your muscles are just ready to absorb that protein. And that's where you're going to see the most benefit, not only for your muscles, but also for that blood sugar stabilization that we talked about earlier. That's really, really important as well. But again, you've got to think about your med schedule. I know that that's hard, but if you just, sit down and work through a plan and figure out the timing just slightly, you can do it all. I promise.
Great. Let's see. Oh, what about sleep? What, people have so much trouble with sleep. Is there anything people can do nutritionally to help with their sleep?
Yeah. So a couple of things that came to mind with this question. Number one, avoiding sugar and or caffeine, later in the day or after dinner, especially within like those 2 hours of before you're going to go to bed. I think a lot of people forget. So if you think about it, you eat dinner, you're like, I'm going to have dessert. And you decide to have some ice cream and maybe some chocolate drizzled on top. Chocolate actually has caffeine, at least high quality chocolate does, but even small amounts in other forms of chocolate. But also then that sugar is going to really get you hyped up. I think it's interesting. Most adults don't necessarily see the effects of sugar and what it does to you. But when you work with children or you have children and you give them a little bit of sugar, you know what that sugar will do to you. And the other night, my daughter snuck in some sugar and she was just, and we're like, it's time for bed. So I think just making sure that you're looking at your own day and understanding like, okay, I need to make sure I'm not having that sugar after dinner if I'm struggling with sleep, because that could be a reason why. Another thing is back to that magnesium. So magnesium can also be helpful for sleep. There are no actual like scientific studies that say this will for sure help with sleep, but I can tell you just from talking with people, because it's been reported to help with some people's sleep, from talking with some of my clients and having them try it, it does help. And so magnesium is a simple option as well, melatonin, as far as nutrients go. Another thing I would recommend is just really focusing on relaxation techniques. How do I just calm myself down from the day? Whether that might be one of my favorite things to do, especially in the wintertime, is hot tea. Doing like some green tea, or there's like sleepy time tea that could be just nice to help kind of bring you down to a level that's ready for sleep. I also am a big fan of meditation and or listening to like spa music to really help me just like get into a zen and fall asleep. So those are just a few things. I know a couple are not necessarily nutrition related, but I think it all kind of goes hand in hand when you incorporate some of those different techniques.
Yeah, for sure. This is a question that I got about people who are living in assisted living places, and, you know, a lot of the food is packaged. They don't have a ton of fresh vegetables. And also, like, they just will serve sweets. Like, they're just
I know.
out. What can people do? What can people do that, have to be in that situation? But the diet that they offer is just not great for people with Parkinson's, or anybody.
Yeah. One of the first things I would suggest with that is, number one, get in touch with that facility's director. Every facility should have some kind of a director, whether they're on-site or off-site, making sure to be aggressive with that. Don't just say like, oh, this is what they're serving him, so this is what I'm going to have. There are ways around it. Unfortunately, they don't make it super easy for people, which is just truly unfortunate, because food is one of the most important parts of everything. But if you can talk with that facility's director of nutrition or a dietitian, I think it's important to meet with them and say, my spouse, or, my friend, or whoever you're working with, or myself cannot, have these meals, or it's not good for them for whatever reason, and voice those needs, and voice like, we want them to make sure that they're having nutritious meals. They're not liking these, or it's too many carbs for them. And they should be able to work with you on that. Again, it just takes that like extra step of going to that next level and saying, I need to talk with this person, because I can tell you just from like a medical standpoint, like there are plenty of people that come into a facility, any kind of facility, with diabetes, hypertension, all different kinds of medical concerns, and their doctors will order that they have a certain plan, and the facility has to adhere to that. And so, unfortunately, because there is no specific diet, related to Parkinson's, these people are getting missed in these recommendations. And so I think it would just be taking that to the next level and saying, if you feel that, you're getting too many carbs, say, can I just have like a diabetic carb controlled diet,
Mm-hmm.
while I'm at this facility?
Mm-hmm.
And they should work with you on that, especially if you're paying for it. It's like, well, I'm paying for this food, so I need to get something that's going to be right for me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, good. Is there anything that I haven't asked that I should have asked? There anything that you have particularly seen with your people with Parkinson's that sort of surprised you, or that you're working on now?
I guess, again, I would just love to stress, the importance of, whether it's on your own or working with a dietitian or somebody, outside of your home, on creating a schedule and a routine when you are diagnosed and you have so much going on, and it's really overwhelming, and your life is changing in so many ways. Be okay with having those experts come into your life and help you straighten things out, because sometimes it might just be a little bit of extra guidance that you need. And then once you get it, you're like, okay, I'm good. Or you might need ongoing help. But, what I'm seeing is that people are struggling with the whole schedule thing. And I think that the more that you work with somebody else on the schedule and help you kind of come up with a good routine, the more likely you are to stick to that, but also have extreme success with getting all the nutrients that you need, while taking your medication and getting in your movement and doing all the things that you want to do to live a full life.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things is like, you're not only are you like, okay, well, I might be changing my diet, but then you're also changing the time that you're eating, right? All of those
Everything.
things. And just like changing what you eat is a habit, you have to like build a new habit. That schedule can become a habit. And hopefully it's just like over time, you just no longer think about it. It's just
right.
Like, until something comes up and you have to switch it a little bit, and expect there to be changes, right? Expect there to be, well, I used to be okay with this, and now I'm noticing this is happening. Well, as Parkinson's progresses, things are going to change, right? So
absolutely. And again, like, I just think it's important to make sure you have sometimes somebody from the outside looking in saying, okay, well, this changed about your life, or you're traveling. This is how we can revamp your routine for while you travel, or, you're staying at your aunt's house, or, the holidays are coming up. And so it's important to make sure that you have a plan, because when you go into it with a plan, then you really don't skip a beat, and you can, again, live that fulfilling life. You don't have to worry so much about so many of the symptoms and side effects, because you're staying on track and you're consistent. That's a key word, consistency. And when you stay consistent with your meals throughout the day, you're drinking your water, and you have your routine, you're going to have great success.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jess, for talking to us today about
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We have so many questions all the time, so it was really helpful. And I'll share a bunch of the links and the recipes that we talked about and all that kind of good stuff in the show notes. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.